Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. I'm Jimmy Evans, and I have an interview today with Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. I believe he is the most fascinating prophetic voice today, and we're going to be talking about his book today, The Mystery of the Shemitah. Absolutely fascinating interview. Let me just remind you before we go into that interview, we have the conference, the Tipping Point Prophecy Conference, coming up September 17th right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex at Fellowship Church, from 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. They're on September 17th. We'd love to have you join us. We have Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, myself, Dr. Mark Hitchcock, Greg Laurie, Billy Crone, Pastor Ed Young. We have a full day that day, plus we're having a question and answer session. You're going to leave encouraged and educated about what's going on in the end times. And there's a promo code there on the screen. You get a 20% discount for watching us here on YouTube. Go in, conference.endtimes.com, enter your promo code. You can bring as many people as you want with your discount there. We would love to have you come and bring somebody with you. It's my great pleasure today to introduce Rabbi Jonathan Cahn joining me here to talk about his book, The Mystery of the Shemitah. I introduce him as what I believe is the most profound prophetic voice of our generation. His book, The Harbinger, the first book that he wrote, which became a New York Times best-selling book, along with many others that he's written. It's just revelation. It's just amazing revelation for our generation. And so Rabbi Cahn leads Hope of the World Ministry, an outreach, international outreach of teaching, evangelism, and compassion that reaches needy people all over the world. He also leads Jerusalem Center, Beth Israel, a worship center made up of Jews and Gentiles, just outside of New York City in Wayne, New Jersey. Rabbi Cahn, thank you for joining me today.
It's always a blessing, Jimmy. Always a great blessing.
Well, you were so gracious to me. I called you many years ago. I woke up at 3 a.m, completely wide awake, could not go back to sleep. And I woke up and turned on Christian television. You were there talking about the Harbinger. And we were in New York City in December after 9/11. And it was just unbelievable. You know, there were still burning in the basement there at 9/11 Ground Zero. And it was a different city. I mean, it was just everything was different in the wake of 9/11. And I remember when I woke up and you were talking about the Harbinger, it was absolutely mind-blowing. And I called you, came to New York City. You took me all over the city. We went to all the different scenes and talked about, all that had taken place. And I remember just thinking to myself, I can't believe that this had something to do with the Bible. I can't believe that this was orchestrated of God, but it was. Not that it was God's will, but this was a warning, a harbinger's warning. And you talk in your book, The Mystery of the Shemitah, and I'm going to recommend that everyone get a copy of this book. It's absolutely fascinating. By the way, this is an updated edition that has 5 new chapters, but in the subtitle here, it says the 3,000-year-old mystery that holds the secret of America's future, the world's future, and your future. And so, Rabbi, thank you for joining me today. And I just want to ask you, just beginning with the concept of Shemitah, because for a lot of people that are not Jewish, they don't understand that concept. What is that?
Yeah, even probably most people who are Jewish don't understand the concept. The Shemitah is if you were living in biblical times, I mean, this would be very crucial to everyone would know it. As there's a Sabbath day, the Shemitah is the Sabbath year. Every seventh year was a year of rest. Shemitah kind of means release or let go. And so every seventh year, they would lay their fields would be fallow. They wouldn't plant, they wouldn't sow, they wouldn't reap. They would trust the Lord for blessing them the year before, just like in the Sabbath day. There would be releases throughout the society, but laying everything really to let go. On the last day of the Shemitah, and the Shemitah goes from really autumn to autumn, usually September to September, the Hebrew civil year. And on the last day, it's called Elul 29, the 29th day of Elul. Actually, it's the day just before the Feast of Trumpets. And on that day, all financial accounts are basically wiped clean. It is a total renewal. If there is debt, it is wiped away. All that's wiped away. So it's a year, like in modern terms, if you're looking at this is a year of economic, financial kind of wipe out, rest, Sabbath, where the fields grow, they abandon their fruit, they rest. So now this was given to Israel. Now this was a blessing, and if you keep going with the Shemitah, the seventh Shemitah leads into what could be called a super Shemitah, which is the Jubilee. So that's another form of it. So you got the Sabbath day, you got the Sabbath year Shemitah, and then it leads to the Jubilee. So in modern terms, if we're looking at this would be, if we were measuring what happened in Israel back then in modern terms, it would be a year of economic, basically ceasing, a year when financial accounts at the end are wiped out. So now again, this was a blessing for Israel. But here's the thing: when Israel turned away from God, it stopped observing the Shemitahs. And then when judgment came, God says something very interesting. And actually, it's all the way back from the law of Moses. The law of Moses ordains the Shemitah, but then it actually gives a hint of the Shemitah as judgment. And later on in the prophets, it's very clearly revealed. God says, I'm going to take you out of the land, and you're going to be in the land of captivity 70 years for all the years of the Shemitah that the land did not rest. You didn't observe them. So I'm going to take all those Sabbath years, and they're going to be 70 of them. The land is now going to rest. So the thing is, the Shemitah is a blessing, but when when Israel turned away from God, it became a mode of judgment for a nation that turns away from God. Now, this applies to, and actually, I know we can get into it. We talk about the end times. I know we want to touch base on that, but that even links up to Daniel's 77s. They're all based on the Shemitah, and in Daniel 77s is the tribulation period, which is a period of a Shemitah, the same length of time. But now the question is, can this apply beyond Israel? This was clearly given to Israel, but God has his ways and God has his patterns and God speaks through his word. And so the amazing thing, and this is where it kind of it explodes, and that is that when you look at world history and American history, and you look at financial history, you see an amazing thing is that this cycle of the Shemitah is amazingly converges with our financial realm, with Wall Street, with world history, and we're not gonna. I mean, as you know, Jimmy, we're not gonna put God in a box. And I said from the beginning of the book, listen, nothing has to happen on a particular Shemitah. Something can, but having said that, that's my caveat. But having said that, the amazing thing is it has converged that the world markets, American market, stock market crashes, all these things up to where we are right now, and we are in a year of a Shemitah. So Jimmy, you're always kind of in tune with this. This is the first one I'm doing on this for in a while, but we are in that year of the Shemitah. So it has converged amazingly. Again, we're not saying every year has to be. Some may be stronger. Some Shemitah years you may not see it as much, but it's amazing. And it's not only financial, it's the history of the world, even the fall of nations and even the rise of superpowers.
It's absolutely amazing. So the first time that it was you that introduced me to the entire concept of Shemitah, beginning with 9/11. Okay, 9/11, 2001 was the Shemitah year. Okay, and so in that year of the Shemitah year, of course, 2008, 2015, and now 2022, those are all Shemitah years. Every single one of those years, there was a financial collapse. And we're seeing it again right now in 2022. So yes. you made the statement a little bit earlier, does this relate to non-Jews? Absolutely. And so in your book, The Harbinger, you make such a great case for the fact that, God was warning America. In 2001, he was warning America. It seems to me like it's getting worse. I mean, it seems to me like these are birth pains. What about that?
Oh, yeah. And it's not, and to make a distinction, I'm not saying, and you're not saying, that America is bound to follow the law. We're not saying that, but we're saying that God is the master creator of all things, and it's an amazing thing. And the thing is that we know when the Shemitah is. I mean, actually Israel celebrates to this day, observes the Shemitah. They do it in their own way, but it's done. And sometimes they get around certain things as well. But the amazing thing is that when you look, I mean, this happened when I was first writing The Harbinger. When The Harbinger came, that's when I saw the link to 9/11 was this great crash. And then, then it's like, wait a minute, it happened in the year of the Shemitah, it happened I will get into it, on the day of the Shemitah. That's what really opened up this whole thing. Now, since we first spoke about this and I first wrote about it, it's interesting because this year there's an Israeli economist who's saying, whoa, look at this. There's this thing about the Shemitah. I guess he didn't know that this came out 7 years before, but this is an Israeli, it made news, So the thing is that, let me give a little background and then we can bring it up to where we are, but I'll give you an idea of the reach of the Shemitah. First of all, when you look at, I'll talk about up to when I wrote the book, The Shemitah. There's been some other crashes since, but when you look at the greatest the point crashes in Wall Street history, up to say 2000 and I'll say 2008, 2015, about 60% of them take place in the year of the Shemitah. Or linked to the Shemitah. Wow. 60%. Right. That's 1 year out of 7. It should be 1 out of 7. Right. It's around 60% linked to the Shemitah. When you look at the month of where the Shemitah happens, Tishri is actually Elul and Tishri. This is again September. You see this. Even economists have seen this, that there's something that things tend to happen not that they always have to, but tend to happen in the fall, in the autumn, October, September, October, tends to be a cluster more than other months. That is the time that is linked to the Shemitah. So it's not only the year, but it's actually the time as well. It not only affects the financial world, but let me give you an example. It affects world history. The Shemitah, the word Shemitah literally means collapse or let go or let fall. Now that economically we see it, but it also has been linked to world history. 1917 was the year of the Shemitah, and 1917 saw the collapse of the German Empire, the Ottoman Empire that had been there for, centuries and centuries. The Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed, the Russian Empire collapsed, all these things affecting world history. And it was the year that America enters into the world stage. So it's a fall and it's also a rise at the same time. When you look at now another Shemitah, and this is 1938, that you see the seeds of the Second World War. That's the first invasion that Hitler makes, or he annexes Austria, then the next year invades Poland. And it goes all the way to 1945, the end of the war. That's another Shemitah. It's a 7-year period. The Holocaust started as beginning in 1938, Kristallnacht and all these things. That's the year of the Shemitah. It ends 1945, 7-year cycle, Shemitah. At the same time, it not only, it's, at the end of 1945, you have another collapse. You have the collapse of all the colonial empires begin collapsing in the year of the Shemitah. And you have the rise of America and the rise of Russia, the Soviet Union. That happens in the year of the Shemitah. In fact, the Second World War ends in Japan, ends within days of Elul 29, the ultimate thing. The first event of the Cold War was a victory march, celebrating the end of the war by Russia in Berlin. And that happened on the day of the Shemitah, Elul 29. So we're also seeing world history, the rise and fall of nations. But and there's another thing I'll just throw in. We don't have to get into it, but I'll throw in that there's even a mystery that links to the towers that nations build are linked to the Shemitah as well. And of course, 9/11, that all converges with the Shemitah, with the attack, with the tower. And if you want, we can get into what happened on 9/11 or link to 9/11 with that Shemitah.
Well, let's begin with 9/11, because you and I, we were at ground zero. We were at the church where the sycamore fell.
Yes.
And they replaced it with a cedar.
Yes.
And it was the worst looking tree you've ever seen in your life. It was. We were both looking at it. It was dead, basically, and I think it ended up dying. But that was a part of the vow that I think it was Isaiah 9:10.
Yeah.
That you've torn down our towers. We're going to put up dressed stone. The sycamores have fallen. We're going to replace them with cedars. That was part of the vow. Talk about that.
Yeah. Well, that is the beginning. That's what started it all, Jimmy. I was standing at ground zero, and that's when I saw the remains of the sycamore. And at that point, I didn't know significance, but something said that this is like the Spirit saying this is significant. You have to search this out. And when I went home and I started searching out the sycamore, and then I was led to Isaiah 9:10, And then it was like the next thing and the next puzzle piece and the next puzzle piece. And it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it became what became the Harbinger. And it is basically, in a nutshell, for those who don't know the Harbinger or know what the mystery is. And by the way, it has not stopped. I know we're going to do a program on that. It has not stopped. But the thing is this, it's the pattern of judgment is years before a nation's judgment or destruction comes a warning strike. Right. It comes in the form of a strike on the land. Happened in the case of Israel, the southern kingdom, in 732 BC when the Assyrians made a strike in the land. Happened in Judah when Babylon came in 605. Happened even the Romans came in, and then there was a withdrawal. Then there's a time period the nation is given to turn back to God. And in all the cases, it didn't turn back to God. And then comes the judgment, the greater shakings and destruction. So the first sign is this attack. Well, it happened in America on 9/11. And the amazing thing is that from that event come all the signs of the harbingers linked to Isaiah 9:10. Now, Isaiah 9:10 is what happened when the first strike came on ancient Israel, and they responded. Instead of repenting, they made a vow, which Isaiah records. And he said, this is what you alluded to. They said, the bricks are fallen, meaning that, the buildings have been collapsing and they've fallen, but we will rebuild with quarry stone. We're coming back stronger without you, God. The sycamore has been struck down, as you said, and we will plant cedars, a stronger tree. We're coming back stronger without God. Well, they made that vow, and then God says, basically, okay, if that's what you're going to do, this is what's going to, you're heading into judgment. Well, when 9/11 came, this is the first sign of it. All the seven, there were seven and then there were nine harbingers start appearing that are from Isaiah 9:10, start appearing in the land. Each one, I mean, precisely to the point that the very day after 9/11, the Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle gives America's response, and at the end of his speech, he says, there is a word from Isaiah that speaks to us now. And out of his mouth, he proclaims it to you, the same verse that was said by the leaders of ancient Israel when they was struck. He is actually prophesying when he doesn't know what he's doing. He's prophesying. He knows nothing about the harbingers that are all appearing, but he speaks them, and it was prophetic. So that is the beginning of that. And then it turns out, I know we're going to get into it, that has not stopped to where we are now. We've been following this judgment template in the Bible. But on top of it, you have the Shemitah template that actually manifested within days of 9/11.
You can't make that stuff up. It's unbelievable. It's uncanny. But also in the Western mind, we think if something's happened, it can't happen again. In the Jewish mind, since it happened, it's going to happen again. And so what's happening is we're seeing God in His mercy. It's a merciful thing. Yeah. That He warned us in 9/11, but the poll that came out last week, the Gallup poll is fewer people today in America believe in God than ever before. It's dropped like 6 percentage points. So we're not turning back to God. I mean, some people are, but in general, we're not turning back to God. So let's come current. Yeah. 2022 is a Shemitah year. And I know you don't set dates, but what do you think about where we are in related to the Shemitah? Because once we finish 2022, the next one's going to be 2029. So what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, well, a few things. And to say, and you alluded from the Shemitah of 2001, then the Shemitah of 2008, and the Shemitah of 2015, people don't realize as much. Every one of them have seen crashes, right, or every single one of them. And 2001 and 2008 saw the most dramatic on the days. I mean, mind-boggling. And again, all right. So here's the caveat is: listen, I'm not saying God has to do anything. Be ready either way. However, be ready. And the thing is, the interesting thing is, and you also alluded to that, is we have already seen the signs of it. Right. I mean, what's happened is the stock market has been rising since the last Shemitah. It had a because of COVID, of course, there was an immediate collapse, but then that recovered pretty quickly. But then if you keep going, then it's kind of going up and up and up and up. And then comes the beginning of the Shemitah of this starts in 2021. It's the end of that year. It starts in September, October. Remember, that's always the time of the Hebrew civil year. So that starts around about 2 months later. I believe it's the S&P 500 starts going down. It starts reversing. January, the Dow Jones Industrial, the very beginning starts going down. So it's been going down. It's been going down. Our economic problems are now are now cascading. Yeah. You know, we have inflation. We have not seen this inflation in 40 years. Yeah. You know, we're seeing deterioration all over. Now, I'll say this: even if nothing happened after this, even if it started to recover, we've already seen like a major turning for this whole 6 months of this year with the Shemitah. So the thing is that a few things. One is, I mean, it can always recover in time. However, just a few things to note. The Shemitah year, when it comes, the turning can happen at any point. Often, the most dramatic time is as it heads to that peak time, which is when you start getting into Elul, which is around August, September. When you get into that, often it's a peak time. So again, I'm not saying anything has to happen. It could recover beforehand. However, generally, often the period as you progress there often becomes more intense. Some of the greatest, as I said, so the greatest stock market crashes have actually converged around that time period, and it is a Shemitah time. So that can have, that's number one. And again, I'm not prophesying it. I'm simply saying this is what's there. Be aware of this, and we are already seeing the signs. The whole world is seeing the signs of it. The other thing about it is that I'll get to end time prophecy, and when you talk about after that, what happens after. One thing is to keep in mind when we started this, we spoke about the 7-year period, and then if Israel didn't observe it, it was gonna be observed anyway. They're going to be in exile. The 70 years of Daniel, the 77s, are based on the 70 years of the Shemitah. Because when you they were in Babylon for 70 years, that stands for the 70 Shemitahs they did not observe. So how many years? 490 years of history where they did not observe the Shemitah. Then Daniel gets this vision, the great prophecy from the angel to give the 70 weeks of Daniel. Well, it's the same thing, but it's reversed. It's now taking 77s and it's now translating them to 490 years to the coming of Messiah. But of course, we know that the last week is missing or is separated. Right. So just to keep in mind, and I'm not saying, the 70-year period, the tribulation is a Shemitah. However, what I'm saying is it clearly is linked to the mystery of the Shemitah, and it clearly is a period of time which is the Shemitah as well. So you could take it as a hyper Shemitah with this coming. So after this, could it be, 20, you're saying to say 2022 to 2029, and could 2029 and that period be significant? It certainly could. Also, to keep in mind as well, when you get to around 2029, and we're not saying anything has to happen, but we're here to be watchmen. We're here to say, look at this. 2029, 2030, around that whole period, you're now approaching the 2,000-year period of the church age. Right. And so, and I will tell you this, Jimmy, before I even knew about the Shemitah, when I just got saved, when I was a new believer, I was always looking at this time period, 2029, 2030. And, just as, there's several things that converge. I'm not saying it has to, but several things converge. So really, the Shemitah is it really spreads to everything.
Well, so let me talk to you about Iran and Israel for just a minute, because we're talking about Elul 29. And is that the date when the temples were both destroyed?
No, the temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av, but it is near that time period. We're talking about August, but at the same time, but here's another thing, is that, of course, on the Hebrew calendar and the Western calendar oscillate. So at times that you could have a convergence of the two, because it's all around the same period of time, August, and then goes into September.
So right now, Iran is defying the world. They're enriching uranium to 90%. I think they have it at 60%. They're enriching it to 90%. They were censured by the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action group that was trying to get, an agreement together. And so there's tremendous tension right now in the Gog and Magog war of Ezekiel 38 and 39. At some point in time, we're going to see that fulfilled, because it's not fulfilled yet. What do you believe about the period of time we're in right now? Because again, we're in a Shemitah year, and many of the most knowledgeable people are saying Iran is basically right there. They're either there or they're right there of getting a nuclear weapon. And Israel's not going to sit back and watch them develop that. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, we've been watching Iran for a long time, and Netanyahu would always warn the United Nations. But now, what's different? You're alluding to it, is that we're getting reports not from Israel and not from, I mean, we're getting that and not from Netanyahu. We're getting it from these commissions that are saying they've reached that point. A number of things. One is, in the period we are now, I mean, one is you rightly speak about Ezekiel 38 and 39. Clearly, Iran, it speaks about Persia. Clearly, Persia is Iran. And at the same time, you have this alliance of nations. You have Turkey, you have Iran, you have Russia, which are all linked together now, and others that are linked together in the prophecy of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And this is to be distinguished from Armageddon. So we're in this period now. So it has to happen sometime before the end. At the same time, and another thing about where we are right now, along with that, is, when you look at all the other things about the Harbinger and the template, America, you said, we have not turned back to God. We are racing away from God. So one of the things that has to happen is America has to fall. I mean, because the American-led world, the world order, that's the American-led order, is going to end. That's not the same as the very end that we read in the Bible. Right. So somehow we're going to see a collapse. Now, the Shemitah is a time, as I noted at the beginning, when you have seen collapses. The great collapses of empires have happened on the Shemitah, World War I and World War II. So could a collapse of America happen linked to a Shemitah? Yes. I mean, and the thing is, listen, we are already deteriorating economically. Our position in the world, our enemies are rising. China is rising. Others are rising. So we're already in the neighborhood. So you're right, it could. And, we are going to, I will say this, we are going to, if America doesn't turn back, which it's not looking like that now, we are going to see a collapse of the entire world order.
Yeah, we're seeing it right now. You look at what's happening in the oil market right now. We're begging oil from around the world, because of, failed policies, and also we're in the withdrawal from Afghanistan, just showed glaringly the lack of leadership and really the lack of God's blessing. We look like we're losing it because we're losing it. And it's not because there's millions of Christians out there praying and seeking God, because I know many of the people watching right now care about God, whatever. What would your word be as we watch our nation decline? We're on the brink of collapse. What would your word be, Rabbi, to the individual out there? They love God. They're waiting for Jesus to come. What would you say to them?
Yeah. And you mentioned the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which is a whole nother thing, which is actually a harbinger. We'll talk about in another program, but it's not in any book, or it's not even in the movie, because it happened after that. But here's the thing. Ultimately, listen, we are living, in dramatic times. We are living in times that are hostile to God. It's increasing all the time. But the Bible said this was going to happen. We knew this was going to happen. So we can't panic because it's happening. God said it. So it says God is still on the throne because what he said is happening. But the second thing is, we pray often. A lot of believers are praying, I wish I could live in biblical times. You're in biblical times now. Right. And these are the same times that Jeremiah lived in, that Paul lived in. They didn't live in a Christian culture. They lived in a culture that was hostile to Christianity. So the thing is, it doesn't stop our mission. It doesn't stop your call. In fact, it makes it all the more important. Number one, we do have to pray for revival, because it's the only thing that can save America, if my people. We have to. And we also have to start living in revival, because that's something that we have control over. And we have to be the lights. But the other thing is that, listen, if the dark is getting darker, you are the light of God. You have to get brighter. This is the time that we have to stand without compromise. We have to stand all the more. This is the time that actually makes people great. These are the great testimonies on these times. So God is saying, it says the eyes of the Lord are searching the entire earth, looking for the one whose heart is his. He's going to make himself powerful for that one. You be that one. God will lift you up. God is not stopped. God's purposes do not have a pause on them. It is, to me, even though it's challenging, these are also the greatest times. These are the most exciting times. You need to rise to your call with no compromise, all out. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back.
I love it. That's fantastic. Now, thank you for joining me. You're going to be with us in September 17th. We have our Tipping Point Prophecy Conference. You're going to be with us. Thank you for coming to be with us. And you're going to have a special message for that day. Any word you want to say about that?
Well, I'm looking forward to that. First of all,